407 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now,
yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
And welcome to another edition of the Historian's Almanac. I'm your host, Dr. William Lester. On this episode, The Historical Dracula, Part 3. Vlad learned all the skills of war and peace that were deemed necessary for a Christian knight. In the year 1444, at the age of 13, young Vlad and his brother Radu were sent to Adrianople as hostages to appease the Sultan. He remained there until 1448, at which time he was released by the Turks, who supported him as their candidate for the Wallachian throne. Vlad's younger brother apparently chose to remain in Turkey, where he had grown up. Radu was later supported by the Turks as a candidate for the Wallachian throne, in opposition to his own brother. As previously noted, Vlad III's initial reign was quite short, barely 2 months, and it was not until 1456, under the support of Hunyadi and the Kingdom of Hungary, that he returned to the throne. He established Târgoviște as his capital city and began to build his castle some distance away in the mountains near the Argeș River. Most of the atrocities associated with Vlad III took place during this time. More than anything else, the historical Dracula is known for his inhuman cruelty. Impalement was Vlad III's preferred method of torture and execution. Impalement was and is one of the most gruesome ways of dying imaginable, as it was typically slow and painful. Vlad usually had a horse attached to each of the victim's legs, and a sharpened stake was gradually forced into the body. The end of the stake was usually oiled, and care was taken that the stake not be too sharp, else the victim might die too rapidly from shock. Normally the stake was inserted into the body through the buttocks, and was often forced through the body until it emerged from the mouth. However, there were many instances where victims were impaled through other body orifices, or through the abdomen or chest. Infants were sometimes impaled on a stake forced through their mothers' chests. The records indicate that victims were sometimes impaled so that they hung upside down on the stake. Dracula often had the stakes arranged in various geometric patterns. The most common pattern was a ring of concentric circles in the outskirts of a city that was his target. The height of the spear indicated the rank of the victim. The decaying corpses were often left up for months. It was once reported that an invading Turkish army turned back in fright when it encountered thousands of rotting corpses impaled on the banks of the Danube. In 1461, Muhammad II, the conqueror of Constantinople, a man not noted for his squeamishness, returned to Constantinople after being sickened by the sight of 20,000 impaled Turkish prisoners outside of the city of Turgovist. This gruesome sight is remembered in history as the Forest of the Impaled. Thousands were often impaled at a single time. 10,000 were impaled in the Transylvanian city of Sibiu in 1460. In 1459, on St. Bartholomew's Day, Dracula had 30,000 of the merchants and boyars of the Transylvanian city of Brasov impaled. One of the most famous woodcuts of the period shows Dracula feasting amongst the forest of stakes and their grisly burdens outside Brasov, while a nearby executioner cuts apart other victims. Although impalement was Dracula's favorite method of torture, it was by no means his only method. The list of tortures employed by this cruel prince reads like an inventory of hell's tools: nails in the head, cutting off of limbs, blinding, strangulation, burning, cutting off of noses and ears, mutilation of sexual organs, especially in the case of women, scalping, skinning, exposure to the elements or to wild animals, and burning alive. No one was immune to Dracula's attentions. His victims included women and children, peasants and great lords, ambassadors from foreign powers, and merchants. However, the vast majority of his victims came from the merchants and boyars of Transylvania and his own Wallachia. Many have attempted to justify Dracula's actions on the basis of nationalism and political necessity. Many of the merchants in Transylvania and Wallachia were German Saxons who were seen as parasites preying upon Romanian natives of Wallachia. The wealthy landowning boyars exerted their own, often capricious and unfaithful influence over the reigning princes. Dracula's own father and older brother were murdered by unfaithful boyars. However, many of Dracula's victims were also Wallachians, and few deny that he derived a perverted pleasure from his actions. Vlad Dracula began his reign of terror almost as soon as he came to power. His first significant act of cruelty may have been motivated by a desire for revenge as well as a need to solidify his power. Early in his main reign, he gave a feast for his boyars and their families to celebrate Easter. Vlad was well aware that many of these same nobles were part of the conspiracy that led to his father's assassination and the burying alive of his elder brother, Mircea. Many had also played a role in the overthrow of numerous Wallachian princes. During the feast, Dracula asked his noble guests how many princes had ruled during their lifetimes. All of the nobles present had outlived several princes. None had seen less than 7 reigns. Vlad immediately had all the assembled nobles arrested. The older boyars and their families were impaled on the spot. The younger and healthier nobles and their families were marched north from Turgovist to the ruins of his castle in the mountains above the Arges River. The enslaved boyars and their families were forced to labor for months rebuilding the old castle with materials from a nearby ruin. According to the reports, they labored until the clothes fell off their bodies and then were forced to continue working naked. Few survived the ordeal. And that concludes another episode of the Historian's Almanac. Thank you for listening to the program. I'd like to invite you to listen to my other program, Agenda Earth, along with co-host Mark Zaski. Agenda Earth can be heard on the cryptoreality.us website, the American Institute of Metaphysics Facebook page, and the Agenda Earth Facebook page. The Historian's Almanac can be heard on the Blackwater Media YouTube channel, the Agenda Earth Facebook page, the American Institute of Metaphysics Facebook page, Google+, and the Historian's Almanac Facebook page. I'm Dr. William Lester reminding you that history comes alive on the Historian's Almanac.